Throughout Pokemon history, the vast majority of mainline Pokemon games give you a choice between a grass, fire, or water type starter. 3 choices and that's it. In the games where those are not the starter types, you don't get a choice in starter at all. But what if they were to make a Pokemon game where you could choose a starter from any type? The grass, fire, water starter would be new Pokemon, let's say, but the other 15 types would be represented by existing Pokemon. Which Pokemon would best fit as starter Pokemon? I'll be selecting these new type starters based on how closely they align with traditional starter aspects. There are a few criteria for this, but the first 2 are mandatory. They have to evolve twice, meaning they have a 3-stage evolutionary line, and they have to maintain the specified type throughout their entire line. For example, Larvitar could be a rock starter, but not a ground starter, because Tyranitar is not ground type. The other criteria are not as strict, they're more just general targets. First is trying to get close to starter base stat totals. These are the ranges of base stat totals for base, middle, and final stage starters, so I want Pokemon that get within or as close to these ranges as possible. Next, ideally the whole line is level up evolutions, and even more ideal, the first evolution is in the teens and the second is in the 30s. I will allow for non-level up evolution methods because there is precedence for evolution methods changing between generations, and also it would make the pool really small for certain types. However, I am gonna try really hard to avoid trade evolutions where I can. And the final criteria, just vibes, man. If I have more than one that are close, I'm gonna go for the one that just looks and feels more like a starter. So let's get started, pun intended, with Bug, which is immediately tricky. There's no shortage of 3-stage options, Caterpie, Weedle, and Scatterbug being examples, but we run into bad base stat problems. Their final forms are as weak as middle stage starters. We do have 4 options that get generally close in the base stat total department though. Sewaddle, Venipede, Grubbin, and Blipbug. Scolipede has a base stat total of 485, Leavanny and Vikavolt have 500, and Orbeetle has 505. Of these 4 options, Grubbin and Blipbug are the most appealing to me. Their base forms lack secondary typing, which is allowed, to be clear, it's just I'm aiming for single typed base forms because of all of the starters, the only dual typed base forms are Bulbasaur and Rowlet. And the final form base stat totals are closest to the target range. Leavanny is the same as Vikavolt, but I dislike that it's a grass type. Choosing between Grubbin and Blipbug is tricky though. Blipbug and Dottler are significantly weaker than the target range for base and middle forms, while Grubbin and Charjabug are much closer. Blipbug has better evolution though. 10 and 30 are technically teens and 30s ranges, while Grubbin doesn't evolve until 20, and then Charjabug needs either a magnetic field or a thunderstone. I'd say both are worthy choices, but I'm going with Blipbug. Its evolution methods are better and its lower stats are somewhat made up for by lower evolution levels. Plus Orbeetle is closer than Vikavolt to the target BST range, and I'm weighing the final form more heavily than the others. Additionally, the line has Swarm all the way through, which is the bug type equivalent of Overgrow, Blaze, and Torrent, so that's a nice touch. Next is Dark. The 3-stage lines that are dark all the way through are Sandile, Dino, Pawniard, Impidimp, and Galarian Zigzagoon, but Dino and Pawniard immediately suck. Their evolution levels are instantly disqualifying. Could you imagine not evolving your starter a single time until level 50? That leaves us with Sandile, Impidimp, and Galarian Zigzagoon, all of which have secondary types I'd prefer to avoid but cannot. It is allowed, there is precedent for it, as I mentioned earlier, Bulbasaur and Rowlet, it's just, I would rather not, but I have to for this one. All 3 of the final forms have base stat totals close to the range, and the base forms are universally weaker than regular starters, with Sandile getting the closest. However, Galarian Linoon falls exactly in the middle evolution range, having a base stat total of 420, identical to several middle stage starters. Krokorok and Morgrem are noticeably weaker. Additionally, while all 3 lines evolve by level up, the Zigzagoon line has by far the best levels for this. It evolves at 20, then 35, compared to 29 and 40 for Sandile, then 32 and 42 for Impidimp. Linoon can only evolve at night, but that is a small wrinkle that doesn't really bother me. Add on that Obstagoon gets the closest to the target final form range, and Galarian Zigzagoon is the best dark type starter. Plus it even does the modern starter thing, where at the beginning it's a little animal, and then by the end it's a furry. Next up is Dragon, and it has several 3-stage lines. The problem is that most of them are pseudo-legendary. That tends to mean bad evolution levels and final forms that are way stronger than a normal starter. But thankfully there is one, literally one, Dragon type 3-stage line that isn't pseudo-legendary, and it's actually a pretty solid starter fit. Axew. As a friendly reminder, Trapinch is just pure ground type, so it is not eligible for being a Dragon type starter. The Axew line's base stat totals are great. Axew has 320, the same as the Alola starters. Fracture has 410, same as Florigato and Quaxwell. Haxorus has 540, only just above the top of the final form range. It is absolutely perfect until you look at its evolution levels. Axew doesn't evolve until 38, and then Fracture at 48. These are disgustingly high, and while they're better than some pseudo-legendary Pokemon, they're not better than all of them. Gibble's levels are 24 and 48. Jangmo-O is 35 and 45. Bagon is 30 and 50. All three of these pseudo-lines are closer to the target evolution levels. And while at first I thought Axew was still the best fit because like, oh, if it doesn't get as strong in its final form, it must level up faster, right? No! It's still in the slow experience group! Of the 3 pseudos I just mentioned, Bagon makes the most sense to me as a starter. Like the others, its base and middle form stats are closer within the range of a starter's. It has better evolution levels than Jangmo-O, and it's pure dragon, unlike Gibble. Also, I like that it does the Charizard thing. It starts out as just a little lizard, and then ends up as a lizard that flies. But of course, Salamence's 600 base stat total is way above 535, the max target for a final stage starter. So I have a dilemma about what to value more. Evolution levels that are closer to the target, or a final form having a base stat total that's closer to the target. It was tough to decide, but I eventually realized I needed to think about not just what's closer to the target, but what would be more fair to play through with. And that made me decide that it's Bagon. If you're gonna deal with higher evolution levels and slower leveling, you should be rewarded with a stronger final form starter, not one that's just as strong as all the others. It'll be work to get your Bagon and Shelgon up to a Salamence, but when you get there, you'll have a frickin' Salamence. Whereas if Axew was the starter, you'd do a similar amount of work, if not worse, and you'd have Haxorus that's noticeably weaker. And that's just not fair. However, I will say this discussion has invigorated me. Haxorus should have had pseudo-legendary stats. It's got those evolution levels and the slow experience group. It's a dragon type, and it's just 540 in its final form? How dare you! Justice for the Axe Dragon! Next up is Electric, and the first thing I need to do is just immediately dismiss Pichu and Pikachu. All 3 members are significantly weaker than the targets, and the line has a friendship evolution and a stone evolution. There are way better options. I know Pikachu's actually been a starter, but it's been weird situations where it like just can't evolve at all. And so we're gonna pick something else. My new game, my rules. Outside of Pikachu though, there are quite a few options, but 2 stand above the rest. Elekid, Magnemite, Tynamo, Alolan Geodude, and Pawmi are all 3 stages, but at some point have a funky evolution method. But Mareep and Shinx don't have that problem. Both Mareep's and Shinx's evolution levels are 15 and 30, which fits squarely into the teens and 30s range I'm going for. The BSTs for the base and middle stages are also very close to each other, and thus equally close to the desired ranges. However, Luxray has a higher BST than Ampharos, and this total of 523 is only 2 points outside the final form range target, just under Venusaur's total of 525. It's extremely close, but that difference gives Luxray the edge over Ampharos, meaning Shinx is the electric starter. Next is Fairy, but it might as well be a rock type because of how many stone evolutions there are. Not that many rock types evolve using stones. It's just like rocks and stones. Anyways, Cleffa, Igglybuff, Togepi, and Flabebe all use stone evolutions, plus friendship for 3 of those. Azurill doesn't use a stone, but it does use friendship. All these funky evolutions have taken out several good options. Like, I said I would be okay with those, but that's if we don't have any other options. We do still have some other options. We're left with Impidimp, Tinkatink, and Ralts. I kinda wish Ralts had a fun little rhythmic name too. Ralts or something. I do have to acknowledge that Ralts does have a split evolution with a stone, but this game could simply not give you a Dawn Stone or force your Ralts to be female and thus just evolve into Gardevoir. As discussed during the Dark entry, Impidimp has level up evolutions, but the levels are not great, so I'm not really interested in it here. Ralts and Tinkatink are the leftover options, but neither is a clear winner. Both have dual types that I don't love. Tinkaton's BST is a bit far from the fully evolved range, and Tinkatink evolves in the 20s. Ralts evolves at 20, which is slightly high, but not as bad as Tinkatink. However, Ralts and Kirlia are pitifully weak. Kirlia is weaker than a base form traditional starter. I gotta go Tinkatink here. It's more balanced all the way through, and it's pink. So that's fun. I will say though that if Togepi had better evolutions, that would be my pick, but alas. Friendship and a stone. Next is fighting type, and let me begin with a question. Do you know how many 3-stage lines there are that are fighting type all the way through? So it doesn't count if fighting is added later, like with Combuskin and Blaziken, the base form has to be fighting type. How many do you think there are? I'll tell you, it's 3. Only 3 in 9 generations. It's Machop, Mankey, and Timber. And Mankey being there means that until the last games, it was only Machop and Timber. You may have noticed that we do not have a line with pure level up evolutions all the way through. Machoke and Girder evolve by trade or by using the link cable item in Legends Arceus, and Primeape has to use Rage Fist 20 times, then level up. So we'll have to live without the perfect normal level up evolutions here. So instead, let's look at stats. The base forms have identical totals of 305. Primeape is stronger than the middle forms by a solid chunk since it was originally a final form, while Machoke and Girder are on the bottom border of the middle stage range. Then Annihilape has exactly the base stat total of Swampert, while Machamp and Conkeldurr lag behind at 505. None of the 3 are absolutely perfect choices, but I'm going with Mankey for 2 reasons. The first is that its final form hits the stat range perfectly, and I care more about that than the middle stages, and its evolution can occur without the need of another game. You could bring back the link cable item from Legends Arceus, but considering all the other things that Mankey has going for it, it's still my pick. Next up is flying. Go Team Sky, and this entry is gonna be short. While there's no shortage of 3-stage flying types, many regional birds fall into this category, many of them annoyingly have the normal type alongside the flying. I would deal with that if I have to, but since Rookie D exists, I don't. Rookie D is pure flying type, the only one outside of its evolution Corvisquire and then Tornadus. This is immediately super appealing to me, but it has other things going for it. It's a bit weaker than traditional starters, but all the other 3-stage flying lines have the same problem except Crobat. Crobat hits the BST range of the final forms, but it's a friendship evolution and also a poison type. And of course, Corviknight is extremely cool. Little bias here, but I just really like that Pokemon. But anyways, Rookie D is the flying type starter. Next is Ghost, which has a similar problem to fighting. Very few options and none of them great. The only 3-stage lines are Ghastly, Duskull, Litwick, Honedge, and Dreepy. Dreepy is the only one to evolve via level up all the way through, but its evolution levels are the disgusting 50 and 60. Which is enough to disqualify it. Litwick doesn't evolve for the first time until 41, which is not as bad, but is still bad. And then Duskull and Honedge are 37 and 35. Again, bad. That leaves only Ghastly, who evolves at level 25 and then by trade. And I hate the trade evolution, but as I've mentioned, we could get around that with a linking cord item that's handed to you at a certain milestone in the story. However, the stats for this line work pretty well. Ghastly and Haunter are both in the target ranges, while Gengar is a little underpowered. Dusknoir is in the range, but again, being stuck with a Duskull until level 37 would really suck. And then of course, Ghastly is a poison type, which I do not love, but so is Bulbasaur. Like I said, not an ideal option, but it's the best one we got. Ghastly is the ghost starter. Ground has a solid chunk of options, but Swinub, Trapinch, Gible, and Sandile are the only ones with level up evolutions. Yes, Piloswine needs a specific move to level up, but it learns it naturally in modern games, so it's effectively a regular level up evolution, assuming you don't skip the move, but like there's move reminders, it's fine. However, in regards to evolution levels for these options, they all stink. The lowest is Gible at 24, but then not again until 48. Sandile is next at 29, and the other two don't evolve for the first time until sometime in the 30s. For base stats, all but Swinub are a bit underpowered, but close. For middle stages, Gabite is in the range, while Piloswine is stronger and Vibrava and Krokorok are weaker by a chunk. For final forms, Mamoswine is in the range, Flygon and Crocodile are close, and Garchomp is way over. In short, none of these are the clear best option. So how do I pick? I don't know. I spent so long on this and it's just, I don't know. Wait. Vibes. Trapinch. Oh, and also it's the only one that's pure ground. Also, I like Flygon. So there you go. I'm sorry, this one sucked. Next we have Ice, which is eerily similar to ground. We have a few options, but none of them are great. Swinub's evolution is late, and while Mamoswine's stats are good, Swinub's are low and Piloswine's are high. The Spheoline's stats work well, but it evolves frustratingly late, and I don't like that it's a water type. Frigibax has bad evolution levels too, and of course, it's a dragon type. And Baxcalibur is a pseudo and thus super powerful. Vanillite seems like the golden child, since it has bad evolution levels like the others, but it's pure ice type, and the base stat totals are within or just outside the target ranges. However, it's in the slow experience group. Are you kidding? Unova, what's with the slow experience group Pokemon that both evolve late and are not that strong by the end? Like, they're not weak, but just like, that's just not fair. And also makes them bad starters. Just give it to Swinub. No choice is ideal, and it's actually in the slow experience group too. But with a move reminder situation in modern games, you can get a Mamoswine in the 30s, and that's pretty significant. It's got the right stats for it. Not perfect, but oh my god, just please let the next ones be easier. Next is normal, and I should first mention some disqualifications. First, I'm not considering any of the normal flying types. I believe those should have been pure flying, so standing on principle, I am ignoring them. Galarian Zigzagoon's already been reserved for dark, and then Smoliv, y'all agree it'd be weird if this extremely a plant, was the normal type starter, right? Like, I don't understand why the normal type is there. I got it with Deerling, because it's like an animal with a bit of plant. But like, this is just an olive. After those, there are still quite a few 3-stage normal lines, such as Porygon, Teddiursa, Igglybuff, Happiny, and Slackoth, but all of those have some kind of issue. It's mainly evolution problems, or it's slacking, being as strong as Groudon, but with a garbage ability. Just a bad starter situation across the board. There are 2 lines that work very well though, Whismur and Lillipup. Both pure normal all the way through with solid evolution levels. Lillipup's are a bit better though, actually identical to the Bulbasaur lines. Both are underpowered compared to starters, but the Lillipup line is less underpowered. Considering Lillipup has the edge in both evolution and base stats, Lillipup is my choice for a normal type starter. Next is poison, and like with normal, I have some exclusions to make. That being mainly the grass poison and bug poison Pokemon. Like with the normal flying Pokemon, they feel a lot more like one type than the other. Ghastly is also out, since it's already the ghost starter, so that leaves Nidoran female, Nidoran male, and Zubat. I like and dislike things about all of these Pokemon. I like the Nidorans first evolving at 16 and their pure poison type, but I don't like Nidoking and Nidoqueen's lower power and stone evolution. I like Crobat's power level being within the final form range, but I don't love Zubat's being lower, Golbat's being higher, the Crobat friendship evolution, and the persistent flying type. It's tough to pick, but I'm going with Zubat. The friendship evolution is an issue, but it's a smaller issue as a later evolution than an earlier one because you've already gotten the Zubat from level 5 all the way up to a Golbat, so that's quite a bit of friendship to grow. And also I really like that Crobat is the proper strength for a starter. Also, if I had to choose a Nidoran, I don't know how I'd choose which one. Next is Psychic, which has several 3-stage lines. Abra, Ralts, Beldum, Mime Jr. in Galar, Gothita, Solosis, Cosmog, and Hatenna. And let's just real quick get rid of Cosmog. How would you like it if you had to have your starter just splash, teleport, and cosmic power until level 53? I discussed Ralts earlier, but to summarize, it's okay, but not great. Ralts and Kirlia are super weak, and you have to deal with the whole Gallade split evolution thing. The Abra and Beldum lines have some things going for them, mainly their stats in general, but both base forms learn only a single move by level up. This is fixable, movesets can change, but they have other issues too, mainly Kadabra's trade evolution into Alakazam, and then Metagross not only being a steel type, which I'd prefer to avoid if I can, but also it's a pseudo-legendary. 600 base stat total, that's a lot. Gothita, Solosis, and Hatenna are very similar to each other. All 3 evolve in the early 30s, then early 40s, which isn't great, and the base stats across the line are all quite similar to each other, but they're a bit underpowered compared to starters. That leaves Mime Jr., which, surprisingly, is somehow the best option, assuming the Galarian evolutions. Mime Jr. evolves once it learns Mimic. In Sword and Shield, that was at 32, but in Gen 6 and 7, it gets it at level 15, effectively making it a teen evolution. Then it becomes Galarian Mr. Mime and evolves at 42, which isn't perfect, but it's just as good or better than basically all these other psychic types. But the icing on the cake is the stats. Mime Jr. is within the target range, and while Mr. Mime is above it, Mr. Rhyme is the closest of all the final form psychic types, only 5 points out from the bottom edge. Like I said, it's not perfect, but Mime Jr. is the best psychic starter option, assuming the Galarian evolutions, which actually works well since I already picked Galarian Zigzagoon. Next is Rock, which has so many options. Geodude, Alolan Geodude, Rhyhorn, Larvitar, Aron, Roggenrola, Roly-Poly, and Nacli. And I'm not gonna go through all of them, just Roly-Poly and Nacli, because those two evolve by level up all the way through and are pure rock type in the base form. Between the two of them, Roly-Poly has a slight edge. Its evolution levels are perfect, being 16 and 34. Many starters evolve at 16, and the Alola starters evolve at 34. They are exact, while Nacli evolves at 24 and 38. As for the stats, both are underpowered compared to starters in the base form. Roly-Poly is worse, but Carkol is in the middle stage range while Knucklestack isn't. And then Colossal is closer to the final form range. Both are solid options, but Roly-Poly is a bit better, and thus my pick for the rock type starter. The final type is Steel, and it is so bad. Tinkatink is the fairy starter, so the remaining options are Magnemite, Aron, Beldum, Clink, Pawniard, and Honedge, but none have good evolutions. I already covered Pawniard's egregious evolution level, and most of the others are better, but not good. Magnemite, Aron, Clink, and Honedge don't have their first evolution until the 30s, and then their second is either in the 40s or uses a stone. And weirdly enough, that leaves Beldum. Beldum evolves at 20 and 45, which somehow is the best evolution situation for all of these. As discussed with other pseudo-legends, the base form BST is close to the target range, the middle form is within it, and the final form is way above it. However, as I mentioned earlier, Beldum's only level up move right now is Tackle. But despite those flaws, I still think it's the best option. Like, its evolution levels aren't great, but they're better than the others. You'll be rewarded with a stronger starter, and while it can only learn Tackle, you can change the movesets. Pokemon movesets change all the time, so it could be altered for it being a starter, and that's an easier alteration to make than an evolution method. So that completes the list. So these are my 15 non-grass, fire, water type starter options. Let me know in the comments below if you were given the option, which one you would choose. If you've watched all the way to the end here, you probably enjoy my videos, so if you do me a favor, check to see if you're subscribed. You may think you are, but you're actually not, so double check. And if you wanna watch some more videos of mine, there's one on the screen that YouTube is recommending specifically to you. It's different for every person watching, so it is personalized for you. But that is all I have for now. So until next time, Poké fans, gotta catch them all.